A bipartisan group of members of Congress traveled to Romania today to meet with their counterparts in Romanian parliament, as well as the interim president of Romania, as the country's democratic status hangs by a thread after its canceled presidential election that's rescheduled in a mere days for May 1st. Now, the meeting also comes a few short days after our very own Alison Steinberg interviewed Romanian nationals living in the U.S. protesting outside of the White House last week about the country's canceled election and U.S.-Romanian relations. Listen.
America cannot accept to have a strategic partner where is a dictator can cancel the election. It's exactly what the vice president said in Germany. Yeah. You cannot be a partner with America and cancel the election just because you don't like the candidate. Exactly. Yeah. It happened that the candidate who won the first round of election, he is the most loved candidate in the last 35 years. Wow. He was in phase to win the election by 75%, 70%. Wow.
And Alison Steinberg joins us now from the White House with the latest. Alison, I find it quite coincidental that this delegation to Romania occurred just shortly after you spent so much time. I mean, you spent probably half an hour to an hour talking to these Romanians living in the U.S. last week. They expressed concerns about ongoing U.S.-Romanian relations based on the canceled election. And now members of Congress like Anna Paulina Luna, Representative Andy Ogle of Tennessee are in Romania today. What's the latest?
Yes, that's right, Emerald. It was a really interesting conversation that I had with many of these Romanian protesters who experienced something very similar to us here in America during the 2020 stolen election, but they're undergoing a very contentious election situation. As you mentioned, basically the so-called far-right candidate, aka the candidate that, stands for peace and sanity, has been ostracized from being a part of the election process. This is thanks to sketchy, shadowy members of so-called government like George Soros and other strange figures who have intervened in the election process in Romania. Even former Secretary of State Antony Blinken, for some reason, had some involvement in, removing Gorgescu, who is the far-right candidate, from this election process. So naturally, because Georgescu gained so much traction and steam from people who just, want a pro-human, pro-freedom and democratic future. Of course, these other figures had to get involved and shut it down, much like they tried to do with President Trump here in America. So the Romanian people are very upset about this. Anyone who dares to speak out on the issue or voice their opinion on this, they say, is censored and canceled and shut down and even thrown into prison. So it's very scary what's happening over there. And so I was really grateful and pleased to hear that members of our own Congress are over there fighting on behalf of the Romanian citizens now, who really have had their voice taken away throughout this whole process.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Georgescu was the populist candidate, is probably the best way to describe it. And we've seen this push against populism, just not against Donald Trump, which obviously happened here in the United States, right? Starting in 2016 and all the way up to today, as he continues to face sabotage from even some members within his own administration, but particularly Democrats, which was on highlighted in the briefing that just wrapped up. And we'll talk with Kara Castronova in just a short moment. But this populist candidate has been barred by their courts there in Romania from actually being on the ballot, right? And it sounds like, according to the people you talked to last week, there's no remedy for him to get back on the ballot. There's a potential another candidate that is considered populist as well. We're going to talk about that in a moment with Brian Brown. But Allison, do you think the people you spoke to last week are encouraged probably by the presence of a bipartisan delegation from the United States in Romania? At least it's getting some attention now, right? And Vice President J.D. Vance called this out when he was in Europe a few weeks ago, the situation.
That's right, he did. And I think the Romanian people are probably very pleased about this. That's actually why they were here rallying in front of the White House, was to gain more attention surrounding this important issue. Like we discussed in many of the interviews, what they are experiencing was very similar to what we all endured here during 2020. And so I think it is, of great benefit for our members of Congress to be meeting with this Romanian delegation to really try to, get things in order here and preserve democracy. I mean, they clearly are working and fighting at all costs to take that away and really instill just full-blown socialism over there. So it's very scary to see. From what I heard from the people on the ground here, they are very skeptical of this other alternative candidate that is not Georgescu. They say that this is not actually, a candidate that is in going to work on behalf of the people, that it's someone that can't be trusted. So they're very skeptical. They're deeply in tune with the fact that something is very off here, and they are, quite frankly, outraged over what's happened. The fact that the populist candidate that they voted for is now just taken off the ballot and not being given the opportunity.
Yeah, there was a lady that you spoke with, really, her comment struck me because she noted that they know what it's like to live under communism. They know what it's like to live under an iron fist. And she told you this about the lack of freedom now in Romania. Take a listen.
Romania needs to get back to be a democrat country. We fought the communism in 1989. People got on the streets. Lots of young people died to have freedom. And there we are, 35 years later, there is no freedom.
A mere generation, essentially, and they're seeing it come full circle. That's heartbreaking. Really excellent reporting, Allison Steinberg. Thank you so much for keeping up with this story.
Thank you so much, Emerald.
It was activist Brian Brown who initially warned yesterday ahead of today's meeting that whoever was organizing this trip for members of our U.S. Congress to head to Romania is undermining President Trump by meeting with anti-Trump forces only. It looks like potentially the current U.S. ambassador to Romania, of which we will ask more about, potentially tried to keep the more populist conservative members of Romanian parliament from meeting with the U.S. delegation. But ultimately, it seems that was worked out. Of course, we do know that some members of the AUR, that more conservative party in Romania, did in fact get to meet with the U.S. delegation. This is the letter that Mr. Brown sent off, raising his concerns. He publicly released it on X, and it seems to have gotten the attention of decision makers, and that situation was remedied. And I believe we have Mr. Brown with us now. Do we? It looks like we have had some technical issue. Mr. Brown is the president of the International Organization for the Family, and we hope that he can join us in just a moment. In the meantime, that press briefing, of course, followed along exactly what we thought it would. The focus, okay. Oh, good news, everyone. We're pleased to welcome Mr. Brian Brown with us after just a little technical hiccup that happens quite often these days. Wonder why, Brian? He's the president of International Organization for the Family. And we're so pleased to have you join us for the first time ever, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So you alerted X and the public that there seemed to be some kind of coordinated effort to keep members of the AUR party in Romania from meeting with the U.S. congressional delegation. What was going on? And it ultimately appears that was remedied for today's meetings, yes?
Yeah, what ended up happening was that, there's a long backstory to this, the cancellation of the election in Romania with Kalin Georgescu, essentially with the EU and other elites put pressure on stopping a sort of Trump-like figure from being able to take the presidency. Because of all of this, they essentially canceled the election, and there's a new election coming up with George Simeon, who's a great leader and a Trump-like figure, leading the election. And what has happened is that a congressional delegation was sent, and unfortunately, that congressional delegation looks like was being led by the embassy in Bucharest, and there's an old ambassador that was under Biden, and it looks like what they did is only try and meet with people that were on the political left and keep AUR out of the meetings. And so, I raised the alarm bells yesterday when I got word this was happening, and luckily they ended up, especially Representative Luna and Ogles ended up meeting with George Simeon, and there was a meeting with AUR members of parliament, so it was corrected.
So this is an issue of a holdover, a Biden holdover, causing problems for actually U.S. interests. Because think about this, Brian, it was just a few weeks ago that when Vice President J.D. Vance was over in Europe, he raised concerns about what is going on with the presidential election. The redo is now scheduled for May the 1st, but he raised concerns about the assault on democracy, not just in Romania, because we're seeing it in other countries in Europe as well. As you noted, the globalists push to keep populist candidates, more conservative candidates off the ballot and out of office. And then the U.S. Embassy actually tried to keep the AUR party from meeting with the U.S. delegation. Are we aware? Do we know if the Trump administration is aware of their own embassy's efforts yet?
Well, I think they are. And to be fair to the Trump administration, as you and I both know, they've moved very fast, very hard to try and correct a lot of mistakes. And I'll tell you right now that traditionally, I'm not saying that Trump needs to do this. Traditionally, there are a lot of holdovers. And in the first term, President Trump sort of obeyed the traditional norms and kept 2/3 of the diplomatic corps in place. And now he's realized he can't do that. And there's been a ton of replacements. It's just one of the replacements has not been Romania. And as you said, Emerald, this is very important, that the administration is very aware of what's going on. The fact that at the Munich Security Conference speech, J.D. Vance twice mentioned the canceled election in Romania shows that the administration understands that there are many in Europe that don't share our values. And that's a reality. They don't share our values because they don't care if the people want to end what's going on with the oligarchs and with the EU elite. They don't care. They're willing to cancel an election. And it was great that J.D. Vance saw this and mentioned it. And I think the administration is aware of it. It's just there's one particular problem in Romania, and that is that even after the cancellation of the election, there's a concerted effort to undermine George Simeon. And the problem is that it looks like the embassy is continuing to be a major part of this problem and pushing aside the AUR party, which I'll tell you, I've known George Simeon for quite a while. The AUR party is a member of the European Conservatives and Reformist group within the European Parliament. They're great party, and there's zero reason to try and sort of ban them. The only reason is because they have a good shot of winning. That George Simeon has a good shot of winning. And so I would say without J.D. Vance saying that, things would be so much worse, because the Constitutional Court allowed George Simeon to run, whereas it banned other candidates. They knew that the U.S. would go crazy if they had again tried to cancel an election. So even the fact that George Simeon is on the ballot is a huge advance. Now what we really need is a clearing of house of the Biden admin picks, and the embassy needs to have an ambassador who represents Trump.
You know what? I bet it's definitely on their radar now. They have, as you said, they have actually been moving faster than the first term to replace some of this diplomatic corps. After they found out with the Ukraine impeachment hoax and Maria Yovanovitch how bad it can be to leave these people in place, right? Now I bet this will move, Romania will move up the list a little bit after this. It's good to hear that there's already some change, because there are eyes on Romania now with Vance publicly, so publicly mentioning what's going on in the country. And I'll ask you, and we've been pleased to have George Simeon has joined us on this show before, so we've gotten a chance to talk with him in the past. Does this delegation's trip today make it even harder for them to manipulate the May 1st election as well? Because there's still concerns.
I do think it makes it harder. I do think that what happened over the course of only a few hours, the fact that once this word got out, that good members of Congress realized, hey, this is wrong. We should be meeting with George Simeon, and they went ahead and did it. That means that people are paying closer attention. Look, a lot of Americans may not know that much about Romania, but remember this, a lot of us didn't know that much about Ukraine years ago, and now that's front page every single day. And, so we've got to realize that, of course we're America first, but what happens in these countries can have a tremendous impact. And we have good allies around the world, allies that, aren't asking us for billions of dollars. All they're asking for is a fair shake. And we conservatives should be willing to unite around the world and keep an eye on those that are trying to undermine President Trump and President Trump's allies. One of those allies is the AOR party, is George Simeon, and we should do what we can. And I'm very happy that many Americans wrote to the Republican representatives that are a part of this delegation. Of course, Omar, you're not going to change your mind on anything. So, we were focused on the Republicans, and there are a lot of more liberal members that there's nothing you're going to do to change their mind. But there were good Republicans on this trip, and I'm very, I think we should encourage and be thankful when they realize that, hey, they're being manipulated a little bit here. I want to go and meet with George Simeon. I want to meet with AOR party. And these members of Congress did that on their own once they started hearing from, American conservatives and pro-Trump people saying, hey, you should meet with George Simeon. So that's great that there's now more of a sort of brotherhood around the world where we're helping one another.
Yeah, it is. And like you said, there's a reason that the globalists want to hang on to Romania, right? And usually when they do, it runs counter to U.S. interests. As you noted, we weren't paying a ton of attention to Ukraine, but the globalists were. The Obama administration was, right? And we also know there had been Biden family ties in Romania. So we'll be reaching out to the State Department to get their position on this, and if they plan any changes for the embassy there anytime soon. And Brian Brown, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. I wouldn't have known this was going on had you not posted it. And we've been trying to keep our audience abreast of what's going on in Romania, because not only do we fight for election security here, but we believe it should be the right of people. We've had our eyes on Romania. So thank you so much for joining us. And let's reconvene soon as we get closer to the new election date in Romania.
Thank you so much.
And our own Cara Castanova was in the White House briefing room earlier today, where Caroline Leavitt broke this news about President Trump's plans for later in the day. Listen.
Yesterday in the Oval Office, administration officials made it very clear that El Salvador is responsible for Mr. Abrego Garcia, yet El Salvador's president said we're not going to do anything with him. So my question is, who is responsible for this man and where he's going to end up?
Well, no. First of all, President Bukele said that he is not going to smuggle a foreign terrorist back into the United States of America, as many in this room in the Democrat Party seemingly want him to do. Abrego Garcia was a foreign terrorist. He is an MS-13 gang member. He was engaged in human trafficking. He illegally came into our country. And so deporting him back to El Salvador was always going to be the end result. There is never going to be a world in which this is an individual who's going to live a peaceful life in Maryland, because he is a foreign terrorist and a MS-13 gang member. Not only have we confirmed that, President Bukele yesterday in the Oval Office confirmed that as well. So he went back to his home country, where he will face consequences for his gang affiliation and his engagement in human trafficking. I'm not sure what is so difficult about this for everyone in the media to understand, and it's appalling, truly appalling, that there has been so much time covering this alleged human trafficker and this gang member, MS-13 gang member. It's truly striking to me.
Caroline Leavitt announced that President Trump will sign an executive order later today to end benefits for illegal aliens. Kara Castronova joins us now for the breakdown of today's briefing. Kara, it's at the White House as always. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Emerald. So yes, today Caroline spoke on many things. A lot of the stuff that you just played was pretty much the theme today for a lot of the legacy media, really kind of just talking about the due process of the illegal alien that was sent to El Salvador, but also talking about President Biden, former President Biden's speech later tonight. And like you mentioned, Social Security, the president is set to sign a memorandum later today, regarding illegal aliens not being able to sign up for Social Security benefits. So please take a listen to Caroline Leavitt speaking on that memorandum that will be signed by the president a little bit later today. So basically,
on the topic of Social Security, I have some news before I let you all go. Later this afternoon, the president will be signing a presidential memorandum aimed at stopping illegal aliens and other ineligible people from obtaining Social Security Act benefits. The memorandum will direct the administration to ensure ineligible aliens are not receiving funds from the Social Security Act programs. It will expand the Social Security Administration's fraud prosecutor program to at least 50 U.S. attorney offices and establishes a Medicare and Medicaid fraud prosecution program in 15 U.S. attorney offices. The memorandum will also require the Social Security Administration Inspector General to investigate earning reports for individuals aged 100 or older with mismatched Social Security records to combat identity theft. And the memorandum will direct the Social Security Administration to consider whether to reinstate the use of civil monetary penalties against individuals who engage in Social Security fraud, an effort that has been paused for several years. These taxpayer-funded benefits should be only for eligible taxpayers. And President Biden should think about what he did in his last term, which is allow tens of millions of illegal people into our country, many of whom were fraudulently receiving these benefits. So
there you go. I thought that soundbite was going to keep playing longer, but that's great news, Kara. You see what I do behind the scenes, right? When I'm ready, that's some behind the scenes TV there, that our cues. But this is actually really good news, and it's only common sense, right? To end Social Security benefits for illegals. When we're talking about the kind of trillions, the $1 trillion deficit we have, you can say you don't know why the left-wing media is opposed to it, but they were pretty upset about that statement, it seemed.
It seems like that's the theme, really, of former President Biden's speech tonight. He's speaking for the first time, I believe, since he was president. This is his first speech, and the assumption is that he's going to be talking about Social Security and probably fear-mongering the American public, saying that Trump is a threat to Social Security, he's a threat to Medicare, and all of these things. So, that is obviously a topic that people are talking about. And there was a clip I wanted to share. This is a quick clip, so don't worry. This is a funny moment that was in the press briefing. Caroline Leavitt sort of pulling a Donald Trump move, you could say, making fun of President Biden when somebody had asked about that speech tonight. So just take a listen to this quick clip of Caroline Leavitt talking about President Biden's speech tonight.
My first reaction when seeing former President Biden was speaking tonight was, I'm shocked that he is speaking at nighttime. I thought his bedtime was much earlier than his speech tonight. I understand the topic of his speech will be Social Security. Let me make it very clear ahead of former President Biden's remarks. President Trump, is absolutely certain about protecting Social Security benefits for law-abiding, tax-paying American citizens and seniors who have paid into this program. He will always protect that program. He campaigned on it, he protected it in his first term, and he's back again to continue protecting it.
Thank you.
So I thought that was a fun moment. That was a nice light moment. It
was so easy, right? It's totally past his bedtime. As soon as the reporter asked the question, that's exactly what I thought too. You mean he's saying it past his bedtime?
Right, exactly. So people are interested. I guess some liberals are interested in seeing that speech tonight, and I guess conservatives are just wanting to see if Biden could stay awake. So, yes.
We'll see. We'll all be watching to see if he stays awake, and I'm sure we'll have some good fodder for tomorrow for more fun. Thank you so much, Kara Castronova, as always.
Thank you, Emerald.
And about the same time, which is usually past Biden's best time, you can catch me again tonight at 8 p.m. right here on Lindell TV. I will be continuing to cover the story of the U.S. congressional delegation to Romania and what it portends for the much anticipated and watched May 1st redo presidential election in that country. Join me tonight to discuss further will be a Romanian member of parliament, Mihail Neamtu. So you do not want to watch that. I'll see you back at 8 p.m. tonight. And that's the absolute truth for now. Until later, here's Vanessa Broussard.